Kernersville, North Carolina. This podcast will feature Effley, where he will share extensive knowledge and his experiences about the origin and history of various African American artistic, cultural, and historic materials. After you see the podcast, we ask that you reflect on the information and to keep the conversation going wherever you are. So let's get started. And Effley, I have a couple questions for you. And the first one I wanted to ask you is, can you tell us about yourself and your background?
Yes. Well, my name's Effley Dean Howell, and I'm married, and I have two beautiful children. And so I was born in Wilkesboro in 1957, went to our all-black school for the first 3 years, and then started integrating the schools because of Rosa Parks. And so I went on to complete high school, and I joined the Navy. And after that, I've been working for a corporation out of Greensboro for the last 40 years.
All right, that's wonderful. And you're getting close to retirement, I understand. I remember you shared that with me. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. About 6 months from now, I should be getting ready to retire and I'm looking for a permanent home for the museum.
Okay.
And we're planning on, having a place where everybody can come and visit us.
That sounds really good. Thank you for sharing that information about your background and a little bit about who you are. And I also wanted to just ask you to share information with our viewing audience about Thankful Heritage Museum. And if you could, share with us the services that you offer through your company and what do you do for the community?
Well, thank you. But Thankful Heritage started in 1993. And Thankful Heritage is a traveling Black History museum. And it is an opportunity for the seniors to take a trip down memory lane. Also, it's an opportunity for the youth to hear about and see a lot of the things that their grandparents, parents, and teachers taught them about. So when you come to Thankful Heritage, then just like this podcast, you should be able to see a lot of things that you have heard about or you may have been able to see in a book. But this is an opportunity to see hundreds and thousands of things that we've been collected over the last 27 years. And
I understand what you had talked about earlier is that you're looking for a current location for the museum. But I also understand that you have a traveling museum. You could take artifacts and some of your materials to different locations. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. Over the last 27 years, we have become a 501c3, and we've won awards. And, please go to our website at thankfulheritagemuseum.org.
Okay.
And see our history and, be able to follow us. And we do have a traveling museum where we go to churches, schools, businesses, and communities and centers, and we set up different exhibits, and we're able to interact with the public, and they can not only see the exhibits, but they can ask questions about it. And if you have a topic that you want to cover dealing with civil rights or dealing with diversity, then we can bring things that are relevant to it, where everybody can be able to feel good about it and at the same time learn about the history.
I think that's so wonderful with what your company offers and what you share, as far as giving people an opportunity to learn about history, specifically Black history, African American history in our country. And one thing that when I first met you and you shared, your story and you shared information about your company, all of the different materials and artifacts and memorabilia that you had, it was overwhelming. And I just had a chance to see a glimpse of them. So when we were talking about this idea in the podcast, I said that is a great opportunity to share information about many of those pieces of memorabilia and items that you had. And each one has a story.
yes.
Each one has background related to African American culture, African American history in the United States of America. And so that's why we wanted to put together this podcast and be able to share it out to our viewing audience, because we felt it was so important to let folks know about that history, whether you're a senior or a young adult as well as a child, and to be able to get background about it and get the stories behind it and maybe see what the origin was. And then that is something that hopefully people can continue that conversation, wherever you are watching this show today. So with that, I see that you have a few things that you're going to share with the viewing audience as far as Black History memorabilia. And I think the first one you said you wanted to talk about is Ebony. So I will turn it over to you and let you share with the viewing audience some information about some of the artifacts that you have with us today.
Okay,
right.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Well, the first item that I would like to talk about is the Ebony Magazine. And this is the first issue of Ebony Magazine. Mm-hmm. And it started in 1945. And so the Civil War, not the Civil War, but World War II had just ended. And the black soldiers had been fighting for freedom abroad, but now they were also fighting for freedom at home. Mm-hmm. And so with that, John Johnson had been in Chicago, and he'd been doing a magazine called Negro Digest from November 1942, and it had no photographs in it. It was just, mostly words, but Time Magazine, Life, and Look Magazine had magazines that they told about American culture, American history, and all the athletes and entertainers and medical field. And so they chose not to include African Americans. Mm-hmm. And if they did, it was maybe just one that was real historic, but usually there was no blacks in there at all in any of the advertisements or articles. Mm-hmm. So John Johnson said, well, hey, I'll start doing this Ebony. And so November 1945 was the first issue. And it was just a very historic thing that he did at that time. And his mother loaned him, took out a loan on her furniture, $500.
Okay.
And it grew into a multi-million-dollar business. And so John Johnson was the one who started it. He had Negro Digest, and then he had Ebony. Then he came back in November of 1951 with Jet Magazine. And he also had a few others, Tan and others, and he had Ebony Jr. Mm-hmm. But he was the person who started and who had the ability to take and bring Jackie Robinson, Joe Louis, Ellis Fitzgerald, Mahalia Jackson, Sammy Davis Jr., Michael Jackson, and all of them into our lives as well as the lives of all Americans and the world. Mm-hmm. And everybody got to see us in a positive image and got to know us for more than just singers and dancers.
Mm-hmm. At that time, being able to publish and bring to your coffee table or to your kitchen table information about, Black stars, Black history, things that were happening during those times when you could go and buy a copy of Ebony as well as Jet, and be able to see what was going on and see the things that they were participating in. And it offered you an opportunity where you could, read it and discuss it and see how others were living and seeing how other parts of the United States and things that were happening as well as in the world. And it just seems like, Ebony was one of those venues for African Americans and whomever else that had an interest in our culture where they could pick up a copy and read about it and come up to date with those things that were happening, within our community. So it definitely was a rich source of information. And I understand, is it still currently being published or is it online?
Well, okay, the last issue that Johnson Publishing Company did was in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2019, after it was sold, then the company who bought them out, they stopped production in 2019.
2019, okay.
Yeah. And so now some of the covers, if you go to eBay and look them up,
Mm-hmm.
you'll find some of the covers that are even in the 50s and 60s that
Mm-hmm.
are running well over $100, $200. And then
Wow.
the issue that we have here today, it is much sought after,
Mm-hmm.
and it can even bring four figures if
Wow.
people
Pretty expensive what I'm holding in my hand there.
they were able to get it. So it is a very rare piece, but also are the pieces that followed it
Mm-hmm.
with Duke Ellington
Mm-hmm.
and it's for the Piedmont Triad, Charlotte Hawkins Brown site down in Burlington. They had the Palmer Institute, and they did a
Mm-hmm.
special there, and they did specials in Winston
Okay.
with different African Americans, and
Mm-hmm.
so it was an opportunity for you not just to see the Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, but you got to see your local
Mm-hmm.
history, and you was able to, be able to tell your kids, well, yeah, we can take a trip down
Mm-hmm.
there, and see those.
Like you said, it's just not happening, in the big metropolitan areas. It was happening everywhere in America, and that's what Ebony tried to do, is go out and capture, all those events, whether small or large, talking about Black folk and the powerful things that they were doing, in the world, and this was a venue to capture it. So, I would say too, if you're looking through things in your home, or you're over your grandparents, or maybe your aunts and uncles or friends, and you happen to run by some old copies of Ebony or Jet, don't throw them out.
No.
Keep them, because they are cherished, documents of our history, and as you can see, they have a worth. And so I just wanted to say that is some great information. Hopefully, people will dig a little deeper and try to see if they can find some old Ebonies and Jets in their household. So I just wanted to see, I think you had another second item that you wanted to cover with our viewers, and wanted to see what you have for us for the second item.
Yes. Now, our second item is part of the March on Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we do with Thankful Heritage is we try to cover the memorabilia, but we try to cover the history. And I guess I was, trying to, get some touching and feeling
Mm-hmm.
that I could, depend on and do when I was out doing presentations. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started doing the I Have a Dream speech with Dr. King, but also in 1995, the major networks decided to highlight the major milestones of the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did that on television, and so all the networks were going to broadcast live from different places. And so I went to Greensboro because they were doing the Greensboro 4, and if you go to the 1995 stamps that are called To Form a More Perfect Union, you will see that they were highlighting the 1948 integration of the military,
Mm-hmm.
the 1954 Brown versus Board,
Okay.
1955 Rosa Parks sitting down on the bus, 1957 Little Rock, Arkansas, the 1960 Greensboro sitting, the 1961 Freedom Rides, 1963 March on Washington, 1964 March from Selma to Montgomery, and the 1965 Voting Rights Bill, and the 1965 Civil Rights Bill.
Civil Rights Bill, okay.
And so out of that, Dr. King, really became famous during that time with Montgomery and the different marches. and John Lewis was there also. But in 1963, they had what would become the largest demonstration in American history. And so after the Civil War, and because of the new media called television, that everyone was able to not just not just read in a book or a newspaper, they would be able to see it live.
See it actually live.
And so John Kennedy, he did have the National Guard standing by. And so people did not know what would happen when all these people came out to demonstrate for jobs and for freedom. And so during that time, they gave out this here, which is a commemorative for the March on Washington. And it was given out on that day, and it is a very rare document. And inside it, it has different covers that they were trying to concentrate on because just like today, they were fighting for civil rights, and they were fighting against police brutality, and they were trying to everybody was trying to get jobs. So it's just very similar to what it is today, what we are fighting for today.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, from, the different time frames of history that you shared, and it's the same thing today, in 2020, and, with race relations and police brutality, everything that's happened in our country and the turmoil that we're in currently, trying to overcome it. And it's just an ongoing battle that our community has had to deal with. And as you can see, the struggles go back many, many years, even before this,
Yes.
And but like you said, I mean, it's something that it's a continued effort that's very important for us to overcome. And, collectively, people are going to challenge it, and be able to talk through those ideas of how to overcome, those challenges with our race. And so definitely important efforts from that standpoint. And so it's just, a very worthwhile document that has a lot of history here. And it's something that we want to, basically be able to share with the viewership to give that connection. Is there anything else, that was highlighted, during that time frame within the document?
Yeah. Well, they were talking about I guess five things that were more or less that they wanted to concentrate on, and with this being such an old document,
you had to handle it pretty carefully there.
Right.
I was just interested to see, what some of those other things were, because I'm sure they're very, very, very similar to, what's happening in our time frame currently.
Right. And then, that for you. And in the table of contents, what they were doing was they said, then they had these 5 different drawings. And in these 5 different drawings, the first one is they were talking about jail. A jail can only hold a man's body. His mind and heart remain free. So this was one of the ones that they had that one of the documents they had that they showed that they gave out to the people who actually came to the march on August the 28th, 1963. Okay, and then the second one is the use of dogs to fight men of cowardice, and only the users are degraded. And so they had this picture also highlighting that. And, it's just bad that dogs and fire hoses were used against children because they wanted to vote and be equal. And then the third one is when religious and patriotic symbols are used as shields by hatred, our democracy and all it stands for becomes a mockery. And so a lot of people stood behind the cross, but then they were burned in people's yards. They were burned at people's businesses, and people were whipped and even murdered with a cross burning out there. So this was another one that they wanted to highlight.
Wow.
And then the swastika, the high pressure hose, instruments of brutality can never dampen the spirits of free people. And so they showed that. And so we all know the history
Yes.
of the Jews and what happened to them. But the African American history, which is part of the American history, a lot of times our history is not told and taught like it should be.
Exactly.
And then the last one they had is We Shall Overcome. And the process assumes the responsibility as well as the rewards of citizenship. And so in 1963, people were voting for their Voting Rights Act.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were being taxed every time they went and purchased something,
Mm-hmm.
but they did not actually have the right, and so the right to vote. And so even today, it's important that we teach our youth to not only have a individual, right to whichever party they should choose to go with, but also to go out and vote for whoever you should want to vote for, because people have died and suffered for that right.
Exactly. That's something that, I share with my young daughters, at least the twins. They're this is the second go round of them voting. But this election is so important for folks of all ages to go out and vote, and to figure out what direction they want to take the country in. So, whatever your affiliation is, that's up to you. But just the importance of going out and exercising your right to vote, because, like you said, so many people gave up their lives, and it had so many changes, to the lives and family members, and especially in our community, because we didn't have that right at one time. So, and that's one thing I say: if you have the opportunity to vote, then you need to get up and go vote.
Yes.
And just as simple as that. And so November 3rd is coming up, and if you hadn't voted early, make sure you get out and vote on November 3rd. And we're saying that to everyone, so just remember the importance of that. So I think you have one more here for us, and something that I saw that I thought was very interesting. Honestly, it has a derogatory term that has been used against our people, which is false, and it shouldn't be used as a slur and to grade us. But I wanted you to have an opportunity to share some history and how it was used to market.
Oh yes.
Market goods. So I think if you could share, the last artifact that you have, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Well, okay, and as we live in a time that Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben are beginning to disappear from the scene, then before them there was this tobacco, and it was called nigger hair tobacco. In 1878, they started producing this product, and you can imagine going to the store and people calling you different names, but you're trying to purchase an item, and you see that this item has nigger hair on it. And so nowadays, politically correct, we just say the N word. And so, but this was something that people had to face and had to see on the counters as they went to the stores. And so this was a process they had. And then after the 60s, around 1974 or so, then they changed the name of it.
They changed the name of it. Wow.
Yeah.
I just, that was one thing I couldn't believe, is that at one time, they were actually marketing products with racial slurs.
Oh, yes.
To get people to purchase the product. And that's why I was so, I was just flabbergasted, to be honest with you. And that's why I wanted, to be able to have you share with the viewing audience, just those kind of things that you have in your collection. It's just amazing. And I think, the average person would have no idea, that companies had used us to market their products, and it's just horrible.
Yes, they called us coons, and they painted the big red lips and bucking eyes, but this was what America did during the minstrel times. And so as time went on, a lot of people who had never lived around African Americans, and they would see these items, and early TV may show minstrels, and so they thought that this was natural.
Can you expand upon the minstrel times?
Yes.
Of those times in America, and what was it?
Yes, and during the early days of the organization of the, I guess, the towns and the saloons and the shows, they had minstrels. And the minstrels would be white men dressed in blackface, and even sometimes black people who put on even blacker face. But it was a time that black people were laughed at. You could not speak correct English. They had big shoes on, and it was an opportunity that people used us for entertainment, to joke and talk about us. And Aunt Jemima their logo was founded by this. But also, whenever you look at this early minstrel show, a lot of people, especially out in the Northwest, they were introduced to people with dark skin through a minstrel show.
Wow.
And so although they did not know that this was not the correct way, they did not know about W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, but at that same time, this was what they were taught black people looked like and sound like, and they taught everybody, especially the immigrants that came from overseas, this is how these particular people act out of slavery.
So perpetuated the stereotypes.
Yes.
Of African American people. It's just interesting to be able to share that information, because a lot of times you may hear that word and don't know the context of it. And that's one thing that, I think is so important about what we're trying to do, is to say, we can't necessarily cover everything in just a short time period, but it's enough to jog your memory or prod you to say, hey, that's interesting, let me check into it further. So that's why we were saying is the things that we've talked about today is to go out and maybe do your own research, and if you have an interest in that, and keep the discussion going, because I think it educates. You need to know your history, because you never know if your history comes back around again. Amen. And so that's one thing that we wanted to share going through this process. And as you can see, we had 3 important items that has a lot of history related to our African American culture and history. And as you identify, some of the origins of what took place during those time periods. And I just wanted to say that, I appreciate this opportunity to go through the process. And we definitely want to thank the viewing audience, for tuning in today. And this concludes our first Thankful Heritage Museum podcast. Thanks, Effley, for kicking off the podcast. And we really appreciate everything you shared today with that very rich and resourceful information. Don't forget to tune in to our next podcast on Facebook Live, which is scheduled for Saturday, November 14th, 2020 at 12 noon. So you'll be able to see us again and be able to, get some additional information shared with you regarding, the materials in African American culture. So if you need any services from the Thankful Heritage Museum, we ask that you go to his website, www.thankfulheritagemuseum.org, for more information. If you need any photo, video, or web design services, you can go to my website, which is www.Dink Digital Productions, for more information. And this podcast was brought to you by Dink Digital Productions and Thankful Heritage Museum in partnership. And we wanted to thank the viewing audience for tuning in. And until next time, God bless, take care, and be thankful for your heritage.